Robert Mitchell's oldest cow was dying, and his boots had frozen solid. It was 4:30 in the morning, January 1943, somewhere in central Wisconsin, where the darkness felt thick enough to cut with a knife. His wife Martha had shaken him awake 3 minutes ago, with news that made his stomach drop. Bessie, their best milk producer, was down in the barn making sounds no cow should make, probably bloat, maybe worse. They had maybe 20 minutes to save her before they lost an animal worth more than 2 months of farm income. Robert jumped out of bed and ran to the mudroom where he'd left his work boots the night before. His hands found them in the darkness, and his heart sank. The leather was frozen hard as stone, rigid blocks of ice that wouldn't bend even when he tried to force them. The moisture from yesterday's work, combined with temperatures that had dropped to 8 below zero overnight, had turned them into unusable chunks. He had no other boots. This was 1943, middle of the war, and leather was rationed. You got one pair of work boots and you made them last, period. His Sunday church shoes were useless for barn work. Martha's boots were 3 sizes too small, and Bessie was dying in the barn right now, every second counting. Robert stood there in his union suit and socks, holding those frozen boots, listening to the wind scream outside and feeling panic rise in his chest. You can't save a bloated cow in house slippers. You can't work around a thrashing 1,000-pound animal without proper footwear. One kick and you're done. But Bessie was the highest producer in his small dairy herd, the cow that made the difference between meeting the mortgage payment and falling behind. He'd tried everything before to deal with frozen boots. Setting them by the wood stove the previous night just meant they froze again while he slept. Stuffing them with newspaper did nothing when temperatures dropped this low. Bringing them to bed was his wife's absolute limit of tolerance, and it hadn't worked anyway. He'd even tried jamming his feet into frozen boots once last winter and nearly got frostbite for his trouble. Think. His grandfather had mentioned something once, years ago, about logging camps in northern Minnesota. Those lumberjacks worked in temperatures that made 8 below look like spring, and they had to be in the woods at first light every morning. They couldn't waste an hour thawing boots. What had the old man said they did? Something about oats. Robert ran to the kitchen and grabbed Martha's 5-pound bag of rolled oats from the pantry. The wood stove was still hot from the night before, banked coals glowing red when he opened the firebox door. He threw in 2 pieces of split oak and opened the damper wide. The flames caught immediately and he could feel the heat building. This was going to sound insane, but he was out of options. He filled one frozen boot halfway with dry oats straight from the bag, then shoved it into the oven. Left the door open so he could watch. The oats started heating almost immediately, and Robert stood there counting seconds, trying not to think about what was happening in the barn. 5 minutes felt like an hour, but at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, he saw steam starting to rise from the boot opening. He grabbed it with a thick rag, dumped the oats into a bucket and felt inside the boot. Warm, dry, flexible. He jammed his foot in, started on the second boot while he laced the first. The whole process took 9 minutes from start to finish. When he burst out the kitchen door into the brutal cold, both boots felt like they'd been sitting in a comfortable room all night, instead of frozen in an unheated mudroom. The barn was chaos. Bessie was down on her side in the stall, breathing hard, her stomach grotesquely swollen on the left side. Classic bloat from eating too much frozen alfalfa too fast. Robert had maybe 10 minutes before the gas buildup in her room and killed her. His neighbor had lost 2 cows this way last winter. He needed to move fast and his feet needed to work right. One slip on the icy barn floor while handling a panicked cow, and he'd be the one needing a doctor. But his boots gripped perfectly. The leather was flexible. His feet were warm and dry and he could feel everything he was doing. Robert grabbed the trocar and cannula from the medicine cabinet, the emergency tool every dairy farmer kept for exactly this situation. It was basically a large hollow needle designed to puncture the rumen and release gas. Dangerous if you didn't know what you were doing, but Bessie was out of options. He found the precise spot on her left side, felt for the right location, and pushed the trocar through. The release of gas was immediate and explosive, the smell horrific. But Bessie's breathing started to ease within seconds. The terrible sounds stopped. Her eyes, which had been rolling with pain, started to focus again. Robert stayed with her for the next hour as she recovered, monitoring her breathing, making sure the puncture site wasn't bleeding. talking to her in that low voice dairy farmers use with their animals. By the time the sun came up over the frozen fields, Bessie was standing on her own, shaky but alive. She'd probably be back to full production within a week. As Robert walked back to the house through the pink dawn light, his feet still warm and dry in boots that had been solid ice 90 minutes ago, he realized he'd just stumbled onto something that could help every farmer in the county. That afternoon, he told his neighbor Earl Johnson about the oat method. Earl had frozen boots sitting in his mudroom right now, had been dreading the fight to get them on for evening milking. He tried Robert's technique and couldn't believe it worked so fast. By Sunday church service, half the farmers in the county knew about it. The technique spread like wildfire because it solved a problem that every single farmer in the northern states faced every winter, and it solved it with materials everyone already had. Earl's wife Helen discovered you could heat the oats in a cast-iron skillet on top of the stove and it worked just as well. The Peterson brothers found that the same batch of oats could be reused multiple times if you dried them out between uses. Margaret Sullivan, running her farm alone while her husband fought in the Pacific, used the method to thaw her teenage son's school boots so they could make the 2-mile walk to the schoolhouse safely. The beauty of the solution was its speed and simplicity. 10 minutes from frozen solid to perfectly wearable. No special equipment, no expensive materials, just oats and heat, things every farm kitchen had. And it worked because it attacked the problem from the inside out, right where the ice actually was, instead of trying to thaw from the outside in. The technique proved crucial that winter of 1943 into 44, when temperatures across the upper Midwest stayed below zero for weeks. Frozen boots weren't just uncomfortable, they were dangerous around livestock, machinery, and icy surfaces. A farmer hobbling around in stiff boots was a farmer asking for a broken bone or worse. Robert used the method every winter morning for the rest of his farming career. He taught it to his sons when they were old enough to work the farm. He mentioned it to his cousin in northern Minnesota, who reported it worked perfectly, even at 30 below. The technique spread to North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, parts of Canada. It became one of those pieces of farm wisdom that got passed down through generations, the kind of practical knowledge that kept farmers working safely through brutal conditions. Simple, effective, reliable. Heat the oats, fill the boots, wait 5 minutes, dump them out. Warm, dry, flexible boots ready to work. 20 years later, Robert's youngest son asked him why he still kept that bucket of oats by the wood stove when they had newer boots with better insulation. Robert thought about that January morning in 1943, racing against time to save Bessie with frozen boots that became wearable in 9 minutes flat. Because it works, he said. And when something works, you don't mess with it. Bessie lived another 8 years, producing calves and milk that helped keep the Mitchell farm profitable through the difficult post-war transition. Every time Robert saw her in the barn, he remembered that morning when warm boots made the difference between life and death, profit and loss, making it work and giving up. The oat method was never patented, never commercialized, never turned into anything more than what it was: farmers helping farmers survive winter. Robert Mitchell never wanted credit for it. In farming culture of that era, useful knowledge was meant to be shared freely. If it helped your neighbor get through a hard winter, you told them about it. That's how communities survived. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed learning about this piece of real farm wisdom that saved Robert Mitchell's cow and spread across the northern states, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it with anyone who appreciates the practical ingenuity of America's farming heritage. This video is inspired by true events and historical farming practices from the 1930s through the 1970s. It is not intended to represent or offend any individual or group. Robert Mitchell is a representative character who reflects the real experiences of hundreds of American farmers who faced similar situations during this era, developing and sharing practical solutions that helped their communities survive harsh winters and challenging times.